Every sanctuary begins with a choice about where to look. In the early years of the 20th century, Carl and Olga Milles chose a granite cliffside on the island of Millesgården, a place where the land breaks apart into the Stockholm archipelago. It was a sheer, unforgiving outcrop of rock exposed to the sharp Nordic light and the damp breath of the Baltic Sea. To buy such a plot in 1906 required a specific kind of vision, one that understood that a home for the soul must be built upon something unyielding, where the elements are felt in their full purity. Hello and welcome to the very first Sunday Echo with me, Cate Field. On this channel, I release quiet wanderings on Sundays and Wednesdays, exploring art and artists and writers and their fascinating stories. I am delighted that you are here. My husband, Jonathan, and I have just returned from a fabulous trip to Sweden, and visiting Millesgården was high on our agenda. We took the ferry from the harbour in Stockholm to the island, and then we took a bus to the house and the garden, and it was truly magical. Walking along the stone terraces, I was struck by the absolute integration of the granite, the sea, the sky, and the bronze. The terraces seemed to grow out of the cliff, stepping down towards the sea in slow, deliberate cadences. But as we climbed each terrace, I found myself slowing down. It wasn't deliberate. The place just seems to ask for a quieter pace. For Carl and Olga Milles, nature was a living presence that demanded a response, an absolute foundational part of their art. The relationship between the two artists was forged in a dense artistic atmosphere, the atmosphere of Paris at the turn of the 20th century. Olga Grana was an accomplished Austrian painter. She trained in Vienna, and her portraits reveal a remarkable sensitivity to character and quiet presence. She possessed an eye that searched for the quiet interior truth of a human face. Carl was a young Swedish sculptor captivated by the monumental, the fluid and the mythic, and their union brought together two distinct topographies of the mind. The structured, intimate precision of the European classical tradition and the vast elemental yearnings of the North. To understand the foundation of this shared life, one must look closely at Olga's early self-portrait. Painted with a restrained, almost meditative palette, she presents herself to the world as a quiet locus of concentration. There's an extraordinary economy in her brushwork. The dark clothing blends into a soft, shadowy background, leaving the focus entirely on the luminous clarity of her face. Her gaze is direct, steady, and remarkably clear of vanity. It's the face of a woman who possesses her own silence. Like so many gifted women artists of her generation, Olga's own work has often stood in the shadow of her husband's fame. But walking through Millesgården, I found her presence everywhere. In the context of the gardens, this painting feels like a hidden architectural beam supporting the entire structure. Before Carl peopled the cliffs with soaring monumental sculptures, Olga had already mapped the geography of the interior soul, if you like, establishing a quiet, unshakable centre from which all of their later creativity could safely grow. When they settled on Millesgården, their creative lives became part of the stones themselves. While we frequently associate an artist's studio with an enclosed interior space, for Carl and Olga, the studio was the sky itself. Together, they gradually shaped Millesgården into a place where architecture, sculpture, gardens, and landscape became part of one continuous artistic vision. Olga's presence in this landscape is felt in its profound stillness. While Carl animated the terraces with dancing nymphs and saints and ancient gods, Olga cultivated the spaces of quiet retreat. Her influence is there in the domestic proportions of the house, the enclosure of the small courtyards, and the deliberate planting of the trees that soften the Baltic gales. She understood that for the mind to reach upward into the monumental, it must also have a root, a place of safety and interior reflection. Their correspondence and recollections of those who knew them suggest a companionship built upon mutual respect and artistic purpose, one that senses in their work an unspoken theology of beauty, a belief that by shaping stone and planting gardens, they were participating in their own liturgy of creation. When we turn from Olga's intimate canvases to Carl's monumental bronzes, we see that same internal discipline translated into massive outward forms. Look closely at the way the bronzes are positioned. Carl lifted his figures high into the air on tall, slender pillars, allowing the Swedish sky to become the negative space around the metal. On a grey day, the figures blend into the mist. On a bright morning, they seem to catch that first pale light before the rest of Sweden wakes up. When we visited, the sky was bright blue and the sunlight just sparkled off the water and the statues. The bronze is heavy, born of fire and earth. Yet when lifted against the horizon, it takes on a different quality, a quality of thought suspended in the air. His great Poseidon, standing on the lower terrace, is a magnificent study in how art holds a dialogue with the natural world. The massive original sculpture stands in Gothenburg, but here on the terrace, Carl Milles has rendered the sea god with elongated, archaic proportions, a figure rising out of the water fountain, as though he was an extension of the Baltic Sea itself. The bronze had weathered into deep earthy greens and blues, absorbing the character of the Swedish weather, perhaps. And as the fountain water cascades around his feet, the sculpture almost becomes fluid. The heavy metal seems to dissolve into the movement of the spray and the light reflecting off the bay below, showing just how completely Carl could merge the classical imagination with the raw, untamed spirit of the northern landscape. Perhaps the most profound distillation of their shared theological vision is found in the hand of God. High above the terraces, a colossal stone hand emerges from a pillar, holding a small, delicate human figure who balances upon the thumb, looking upward into the expanse of the sky. The scale is intentionally disorientating. Carl places the viewer far below, forcing the eye to travel up the massive vertical column until the sculpture meets the open horizon. The small figure stands in a state of rapt, receptive wonder, his body arched back to receive the vastness of the universe. It's a work that captures the exact essence of my little Sunday echo, a visual representation of humanity suspended in the palm of the Creator, looking out into the infinite with a quiet, listening heart and mind. Although the Millses spent many years in America, where Carl taught at the Cranbrook Academy of Art in Michigan, Millesgården remained the landscape that held their deepest and creative roots. The place to which their imagination continually returned. Millesgården became the physical manifestation of their shared interior life. It's a place where the heavy realities of human existence, grief, illness, and the failing eyesight that increasingly affected Carl during his later years were absorbed into a wider, grander reality. The water from the fountains continuously splashes against the bronze and the stone, and it's a constant rhythmic reminder of transience and renewal. To stand on the lower terrace with the water ahead and the ships and the boats and then the granite behind is to understand that Carl and Olga Milles did not merely build a house. They cultivated an echo. They listened to the landscape, to the ancient stones and the moving water, and they answered with their lives. Thank you so much for joining me on this very first Sunday Echo. Please like and subscribe if you haven't yet done so, and perhaps share with someone you think might also like this quiet wandering into the world of art. Take care until next time. Bye-bye.